Welcome to Frontlines. We welcome our viewers from across the United States and Canada, from Europe and the Middle East, Australia and South America, and of course, from Armenia itself. Today is exactly 17 months, nearly 1.5 years since our fact-finding mission to Sunik, to, among other places, the village of Nerkin Hand in Sunik, Armenia. We came to you live from Sunik at that time in a 4-part series documenting the real threats facing Armenian border towns, villages, and the Armenian inhabitants in sovereign Armenian territory. We traveled with our team of experts to places in sovereign Armenia where Azerbaijani military posts literally littered the hillsides, bringing normal civilian life inside Armenia to a grinding halt. Entire towns, in some cases, surrounded by Azerbaijani military units, peering down and monitoring people's movements from the hills. Nerkin Hand was one of those villages, completely surrounded on 3 sides with Azerbaijani military positions in the high ground just above the village. We saw schools in the direct line of fire of Azerbaijani soldiers. In fact, children's death within sight of Azerbaijani military posts. Roads under the direct line of fire of Azerbaijani militants. An airport that ties Sunik to the rest of Armenia tendered completely useless because Azerbaijani military posts are so close to the single runway, in some cases closer than the control tower even itself. What we saw were towns held in hostage, civilians living under constant threat of military action, children exposed to military units. Azerbaijani flags were nearly everywhere, on the face of hills and on the top of mountains. Everything was under their plain sight. That was 2022. Today is February 2024. And just a few days ago, Armenian soldiers were killed by Azerbaijani forces operating from positions inside Armenian sovereign territory. There is no intent to leave. In fact, what we saw proved just the opposite. Azerbaijan is there to stay and even advance. They are fortifying bases with large roads. They were bringing in brand new gas stations and barracks. In 2022, it was clear that this war was not over. Azerbaijan was not positioned for peace. It was poised for war. Just days after the completion of our fact-finding mission, Aliyev proudly admitted that, quote, after the 13-14 September operation, the armed forces of Azerbaijan are stationed, in his own words, at the main strategic heights. And, again, quoting, Armenia should understand well what this means. It could not be more obvious from where we were standing in September 2022 that this day would come. We went to these towns. We showed you what was happening. We circulated live footage of our fact-finding, of our travels, of our interviews with the villagers. We knew this day would come. The leadership in Sunik knew this day would come. Well, here we are. And this is why we've decided to go live again on Frontlines today. And with that, I'd like to pass it on over to my friend and colleague, կարող to introduce our guests.
Thank you, Karnik. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone, to our viewers, from our viewers in the United States and Canada, and good morning to our viewers in Armenia, Europe, Middle East, and particularly our Armenian community in Jerusalem, and the boys and the men who are guarding our cow's garden for now 111 consecutive days, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are back. We are back after 10 months and 10 days. We thought we never had to come back, but we are back, heeding many calls for us to return with an episode of Frontlines. I'll speak on our absence later on in the program, but now I would like to introduce you to our guests, and I'm very pleased to introduce first and foremost. Professor Irene Victoria Massimino, an international criminal and human rights lawyer and an activist, who currently teaches in the Department of International Education of the National University of Tereste Fabrero, if I'm saying it correctly, and the National University of Jose C. Paz in Argentina. Professor Massimino has served as a rapporteur of the Criminal Cessation Court of the province of Buenos Aires and works actively in the fields of internal and international conflicts, serious violations of human rights, and international criminal law in Colombia, Argentina, Chile, Guatemala, Bangladesh, and Iraq. She focuses mainly on external intervention and the crime of genocide. In 2017, Professor Massimino received an inaugural Distinguished LLM Alumni Award from IU McKinney during the 15th anniversary of its LLM program. And she participates and continues to participate in the creation of justice projects for international crimes and genocide prevention. She has served in multiple international investigative delegations and trial observation missions. Welcome, Professor Massimino. I'm pleased to have you with us. And our second guest, who is second to none in my universe, is our returning frequent guest, colleague, brother, and comrade Arman Tatoyan. Who is Arman Tatoyan? If you haven't been in the Armenian or the international universe, let me tell you who Arman Tatoyan really is. He's the former ad hoc judge at European Court of Human Rights, former human rights defender, ombudsman of Republic of Armenia, former deputy at government, agent of Armenia before the European Court of Human Rights, deputy minister at Ministry of Justice of Armenia, former international advisor on torture prevention at Council of Europe, former member in respect of Armenia at European Committee for the Prevention of Torture, and currently the director of Tatoyan Foundation, who is joining us live from Munich. He will tell you exactly where he is, exactly where Karnik and I and some of our friends, Oshim Pirumian, Ruben Musherian, and Patrick Poulatian, along with the mayor of Kapan, Gevorg Parsyan, went late October, early November of 2022. He is in the heart and soul of the Armenian nation and of Armenian history. Quite frankly, I want to welcome you, Arman. You are on the front lines, literally, and I wish we could be there with you on this trip as well. But we're not, but I'm glad that you are there and you're able to join us. Karnik?
Thank you, Garo. Arman, I think it would probably be best to start by letting us know where specifically you are, what you've observed so far, and what the villagers are telling you regarding the events that transpired over the last several days.
Garnik Jan, thank you very much. And Garo Jan, Garnik Jan, I'm very happy to see you again and welcome back to this to Frontlines. And I want to also greet your guest. And I have to say that this has been already several days ago. Azeri soldiers killed Armenian soldiers from the territories that are that they invaded. This is from inside Armenia, and I have to say that I'm now in village Nerkin Hand, and this village is surrounded by Azerbaijani soldiers from three sides, I have to say. And this fact-finding mission is very important to show to the world that Azerbaijani armed forces occupied Armenia, this village, because they are inside this village. They destroyed normal life of people. They turned it into a hell, I have to say. People have no water, have no drinking water. People for already several years, people have no pastures, have no lands. They're deprived of any possibility to earn their income. People have no possibility to visit even the cemetery of the village, to visit the church of the village. All the sources of water are under the control of Azerbaijan, and they did it intentionally, not to allow people to have normal life here, to force people to leave these territories. And also there are regular shootings, by the way, in these territories. And of course, this mission is also very important to change the public discourse, because there is a wrong, very impermissible discourse. Everyone is discussing only some incident several days ago, as if there was an incident somewhere in the mountains. There was a shooting, and the international community is calling on the parties, on Armenia and Azerbaijan, to stop the shootings. Whereas no one is discussing, no one talks about the fact that these soldiers invaded the territory of Armenia. And this invasion is already criminal. This is unlawful. Their presence, every minute of their presence is unlawful. And international, I have to say also that this is very shameful for international organizations, Council of Europe, UN, other international organizations who call only on the parties to stop violence or similar statements. I saw similar statements. I have to say that this is very wrong, and they have to address that these people, Azerbaijani soldiers, are here illegally, and they are in the territory of Armenia. They destroyed the life of normal people. I have just want to show this. I'm standing right now in the center of Nerkin Hand, and in my behind me you can see, I mean, unfortunately, due to weather conditions, it is not clear, but right behind me there are military posts. And this building right now that I'm showing, you can see behind me, is one of them is the school of the village. And you remember, Garnikjan, and with Karo, when we were here in this village, we could very clearly see Azerbaijani post that is installed here. And if you remember, if for a moment, if you keep silence, you can easily hear the voices of Azerbaijani soldiers coming from their positions. Why I'm saying this? To show that this position is so close to the school. And snipers are sitting there and watching, observing, keeping under their target our school. Moreover, I have to say that several days ago, our 4 soldiers were killed from the snipers, Azerbaijani snipers. And the same snipers are keeping under target our school, which is right now behind me. And who can I wonder whether any international organization, any international expert can justify that this is legitimate, their presence here. Their presence here is criminal. This is, I think, the important thing that here in this specific context, we have to push forward.
Thank you, Karnik. I think I'd like to hear from Professor Massimino about her views. Clearly, her views are far more objective, assuming we are not objective, because we are Armenians, and probably everything that happens to Armenians, we have a tendency to take it personally, as well we should. But is this unusual for you, Professor, that some situation like this would go on for so long? Because the alarm initially was sounded by Arman Tatoyan, May of 2021. Karnik and I and a few of our colleagues accompanied him in October, November, September, late 2022. Nothing has changed since then. If anything, things have gotten worse. Is this the norm in international human rights? What are the remedies that we can possibly think of that we're not even thinking of?
Thank you, Garo Gazarian. Thank you, Karnik Kerkonian, for inviting me. Armanjan, it's a pleasure to see you. Unfortunately, under the circumstances, or every time I see you is under these terrible circumstances. But thank you, guys, for having me here on the show. I've heard so much about it, and watched just a few minutes of your previous presentation. So I'm very glad to be here after your few months after returning. So a few things, when Arman was talking about what was happening, this reminds me of a few things. First, Garo, if I may, I can't be neutral either. I don't think there is neutrality ever in any kind of conflict. We can try to look at it from a neutral perspective, but in the case of the conflict here that we're seeing, it's very difficult to be neutral, because we can see which one is the criminal state. It's very easy. What I see is a pattern that has been reiterated since the beginning of the war in 2020 is first, I will talk a little bit about the politics first, and then we talk about the law. The law is kind of obvious. I mean, Azerbaijan is attacking Armenian. It's sovereign territory. There is a right to self-defense. It's a violation of international law, period. There isn't much analysis of that. So anybody who tries to change the discourse does it wrong. It's just for trying to find the way out of the situation. It's very clear. There's a violation of international law and state sovereignty, period. But there's some politics reiterating in the situation here. One is the both-sidism, right? That Arman was mentioning, the international community was talking about the ceasefire of both parties. I remember right after the tripartite agreement of the 2020 war was signed, one of the representatives of the UN, who I cannot remember at the moment the name, the high in hierarchy, mentioned that the both states had to release prisoners, right? Mm-hmm. Armenia had 0 prisoners. A lot of the lawyers in the diaspora, I'm not diaspora, but that's sort of Armenian by choice by now, or by force, whatever, worked on making a statement, sending to this particular representative in the UN, saying this is both sidism of the story. Armenia has returned the only 11 prisoners it had, prisoners of war it had. And at the moment, Azerbaijan continues to have prisoners of war, right? And political prisoners. At the moment, today, more than 3 years after the 2020 war. So this both-sidism discourse continues to exist because very few are pressuring constantly within the international community to release these individuals, right? So this is one of the things that worries me the most about this particular conflict, is that there is a very clear criminal state, which is Azerbaijan, and we can talk maybe later about intent or other issues, what's the objective of Azerbaijan. It's very clear, and consecutively and progressively, Azerbaijan has been fulfilling its objectives. And the second element that I see is that Azerbaijan permanently violates ceasefire agreements, right? Since the tripartite agreement of 2020, Azerbaijan, maybe more than 400 times, I don't know if anybody is counting, but until the full expulsion of Armenians of Artsakh, violated the ceasefire agreement many, many times. And the occupation of Armenian territory has been happening for more than just a couple of weeks. So these are the things. So the politics in the international community have been actually unchangeable since 2020, I don't think. There is not enough pressure put in Azerbaijan to quit any of its criminal behavior, and that's obvious on any of the criminal rhetoric that Aliyev has publicly, saying that they will erase Armenians of Artsakh, and it did. I mean, nobody stopped. It completely erased the Armenian indigenous community of Artsakh, and that it will continue to fulfill its goal unless somebody does something. So this is a pattern. It's not new. It's not 2 weeks. It's not 3 weeks. It's quite a few years now.
So when you say unless somebody does something, Professor, you know, just yesterday, the Prime Minister of Republic of Armenia started talking about warning us that Azerbaijan may be planning to attack Armenia again. You know, it's to me and to many people, Azerbaijan has attacked Armenia and Armenians starting from Artsakh on September 27, 2020. All throughout, you know, there may be a cessation of active warfare for a period of time, but it's never been a peaceful time. And I, you know, my personal opinion is that if you keep feeding the monster, if you keep giving up territory, concession after concession in the name of peace, peace becomes more elusive. Because you're dealing with a tyrant. The more you give, the more he'll take. The more you hesitate, the more he will activate his aggressive policies. Do you believe, do either of you, Arman or Professor Massimino, believe that loss of further territory, either by war or by concessions, A is inevitable, and B is ever going to lead us to what seems to be promised but not delivered: peace for the Armenians of Armenia, peace for the Armenians of Artsakh, who don't even have Artsakh at the moment. Arman?
Karojan, yes. You know, Karojan, what I wanted to say, right now, there is a very wrong discourse. Everyone is discussing here only, again, I want to refer to this very specific point that is very important. Everyone is discussing some incident as if it happened somewhere in the mountains, moreover in the territory of Azerbaijan, and Armenians all of a sudden started to shoot. But again, I want to say that it is very important to always highlight and not to have in mind and to always keep it on the public agenda, international agenda, that there is incursion. There were several cases of incursion starting from 2020, October 20, when Azerbaijan invaded first time territories not far from here, near village Tsaf. And Nerkin Hand, people here, they not only surrounded this village, but they are even shooting here. People live in constant fear. There is no security for people. Moreover, I want to publish some figures. Azerbaijan occupied 2,700 hectares of land, and out of which 2,400 hectares are specially protected lands, 170 hectares forests, 130 hectares community lands. Moreover, plus to that 2,700, 1,000 appeared in a dangerous zone, so-called, which is basically not de facto not occupied physically, but it is a dangerous zone and people cannot use it. It is not possible to use these lands for any purpose, be this agriculture or for any other community needs, for any other purpose. And in this situation, these people, including international people, call on Armenia to stop violence. Armenian armed forces, every minute have legitimate ground to remove these violations. This is their constitutional obligation. This is constitutional obligation of any government to protect its citizens, because presence of Azeri soldiers here is criminal and every minute threatening civilians to kill them. Moreover, Armenian soldiers are protecting our civilians' life and health, which is also very important. And according to international standards, it means that these soldiers are also under the protection of international law. And that is why I think this should be used also by the Armenian diplomacy. It is very important not to allow international public to forget that these people, Azeris, occupied, invaded Armenia. It seems when I read international news, statements coming from international organizations, I have an impression that everyone forgot that their incursions, and which is a gift to the authorities of Azerbaijan, because this was the goal that we're trying to reach. The same situation we have, unfortunately, in many communities of Armenia. But Nerkin Hand is especially important because even Nerkin Hand is not that often discussed in the Armenian public agenda, which is, again, a problem. And
I think he froze.
Yeah, but he did underline something that's really, really important that we need to discuss.
And calling on Armenia, this is the Azerbaijani agenda. We should not allow them to dictate their agenda.
And thank you, Arman, for that, because I think you underlined something really, really important that we really have to focus on here in terms of the narrative, the discussion, and the discourse, if you will. That you said that at every moment, the Armenian military has the right to defend the property, the land, the villages that exist within the borders of Armenia. In fact, it is its constitutional duty to do so.
Exactly, because this is an ongoing violation, Garnikjan, ongoing crime. It continues every minute, every second, right now, every minute. They can shoot right now and kill us even, because very openly they watch us. They are right behind me. They are here right behind me. They are here right behind me. Armenia is on the other side. I mean, this is Armenia, but I'm in connection with Armenia. So they surrounded this village from 3 parts. They can kill these people every minute, and everyone here.
They didn't just, Karnik, forgive me for a second. They didn't just surround from 3 parts. Arman, we were there. We had professionals with us who did the mapping. They're inside Armenian territory. I know the road that leads to Nerkin Hand. It goes through the village of Serashen, where Karnik, you and I stopped and had a live broadcast because we were pointing to the military post that was staring right down at us.
Absolutely, Karaca.
Look, if I'm in my house and my neighbor comes in and starts saying, I'm going to stay inside one of or 2 of the rooms of your house, I either shut up and let him be my housemate, or I remove him, either by my own ability or by contacting other neighbors and saying, look what's going on here. I don't know what the solution is, but this is not sustainable. I didn't think it was sustainable in September of 2022 because water was being brought from elsewhere because they had cut off the water. I remember the cemetery.
From river. People drink water literally from river.
And what's really interesting here is that as Professor Massimino mentioned earlier, the idea of this both-sidism, and now Arman mentioning the fact that the discourse seems to be some mountain area, some borderline somewhere, that there were clashes, and these incidents are not tied to each other, and they're certainly not part of this ongoing illegal presence of the Azerbaijani military literally choking villages and projecting military power over into Armenian territory, schools, homes, businesses, and bringing life to a halt. And I'm going to ask Professor Massimino this, and then I want to follow up with Arman. Perhaps I should ask Arman first a simple question, and then I want Professor Massimino to comment on that. And this involves the European monitoring mission. It would make sense that the European monitoring mission would be able to see enough to identify the fact that the military is in Armenian sovereign territory and is attacking Armenian villages from Armenian sovereign territory. So my first question is to Arman, just a really quick response, if you would. Is the European monitoring mission there on the ground where you are?
Well, I have to say that I don't see here anyone right now, and we will find this out, of course. But they have their number. Well, they are in Armenia. They're in my country to contribute to the security of this country, right? So they have very specific purpose, and they have to record all of this, fix all of these violations, and to report to their headquarters, so that they can make some statements. Other governments as well. But we can see that these governments. I mean, I have not heard from any of these governments any statements calling on Azerbaijan to stop invasions of Armenia. This is what we have. The fact. This is the problem.
Yeah. And Professor Massimino, what are your thoughts? I know that you've had some interaction and some contact with the European monitoring mission in the post-war period. Well, I shouldn't even say post-war period, in the ongoing war period. What is your take?
Okay, so many things to comment on this because it's unbelievable. So one thing, I was actually with Arman Tatoyan when I went to the I think it was May, Arman, when we went to the Lachin corridor with my former colleague Elisa Bonjour-Demporgi, and then with my colleague Luciana Minassian. We went there to do the similar to what Arman is doing now, is the fact-finding mission to see the situation on the Lachin corridor. And on the way there, I think it was after Jarmuk, we found this European monitoring mission. And it was very interesting. Only one person was there in a very, very unstable moment. I like the fact that you mentioned, Karnik, the the fact that this is an ongoing conflict, and this was like my statement from the very beginning, from 2020, this has not stopped. And on the contrary, every time we see Azerbaijan fulfilling its objectives without any limit whatsoever of the international community, nothing. Or internally, I don't know. I mean, Garo was just mentioning the intentions of peace dialogue. I think it's very difficult. I don't think Azerbaijan has at all a discourse of peace. On the contrary, every time, once it had committed genocide in Artsakh, it said that they fulfilled their goal to expel all Armenians, and that was their goal. It was clearly mentioned. So anyway, in this ongoing conflict, and at this at the peak of this conflict, where Armenians were isolated for more than 5 months at that time, when we were, or 5 months approximately, when we were fully isolated in the territory of Artsakh, their indigenous land, there was only one person. We were received, we were allowed to exchange a few words, but nothing else, and no information was released. And I understand the secrecy of the mission, whatever, although I would think that a mission like that could be able to make something public, or at least for some people that had a legitimate interest and that had the credentials for that information to be released, but whatever, let's say it's secret. Afterwards, there was nothing that came out of that European mission, no report, no information, nothing regarding the absolute blockade of the Lachin corridor and of the 120,000 Armenians of Artsakh. And most interestingly, Arman is saying that they're not coming out with any report now or any press release regarding this 2-week conflict. Well, let me tell you, Arman, that the members of the French Foreign Committee yesterday came out condemning the ethnic cleansing, between quotations, these euphemisms that, for those of you who know, I don't agree with the word ethnic cleansing because it's not a concept under international law. But anyway, just yesterday came up with this condemning the ethnic cleansing of Armenians of Artsakh. How many months have gone since October? 5 months now, maybe 5 months, right? And just yesterday, the French Foreign Committee, okay, it's part of the European Union, definitely. It's not the European bodies, but still, this is what I see happening. I don't know what these monitoring missions are. I think it's more bureaucracy, as always. And I've said this publicly. I even said at the European Parliament, these are just bureaucratic posts filling the pockets of some people. That's it.
You know, you spoke about the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, Professor Massimino. A couple of things that come to mind. One of them is that yesterday, the human rights defender of Republic of Artsakh, because I still believe in the Republic of Artsakh, I don't care what anyone or any country or any leader says. I've been to Artsakh many times. I've seen that place function better than most places that have been declared and recognized as sovereign territories. He said that, and I'm referring to Kerem Stepanyan, of course, he said that Russia's offers to help the Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians who are displaced return to their homes is not sufficient, and that international guarantees are necessary. But you know, and I had occasion to meet with Kerem and Artak Beklarian, his predecessor, not too long ago when they were in Southern California. And I'm sorry, you know, for any human being, regardless whether or not you're Armenian or non-Armenian, to suggest that I'm going to go back and live under the flag that represents a tyrant who was beheading elderly people, who was maiming and disfiguring women, who was awarding medals to people who chop heads off of Armenian soldiers in NATO peace exercises while they're asleep. I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. Look, dying is easy. Living is hard. Dying is very easy, but living is hard. And living honorably is even harder. So I don't know what the solution of 120,000 Armenians who are now displaced, who one day they are told they are Armenian citizens, one day they are told they're Armenian refugees. I've not lived during the Armenian genocide. I don't know what my grandfathers did and how they survived that kind of humiliation, that kind of disrespect. But I personally think I have no choice but to live, as hard as it is to live, and to figure out in some small way to take part in the support, strengthening, and survival of my people, because they're my people. And speaking of my people, who today talks about the Armenian POWs? Who today talks about the Armenian prisoners of war, the kidnapped, the abducted Armenians who are languishing in Baku prisons? Not to mention the former heads of state of Republic of Artsakh. Nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it. And I don't know, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I want to blame my government of Armenia, my homeland, my ancestral homeland. I don't know if I want to blame the opposition of the government. I don't know who to blame, but I'll start by blaming myself, because I obviously believed in my people, and my people let my people down. And I am part of my people, and I feel like I let my people down. I don't know.
I think I would take it one step further on this one, Gato, because this is a very specific incident, part of a larger story here, but a specific incident that we have direct knowledge of. If you and I and Arman and our friends that accompany us on our fact-finding mission recognize that this was where Arman is standing today, that Nerkin Hand, just like Shurno, just like a number of other villages, is a top priority issue. Back then, we're talking 17 months ago. And at some point, you got to blame the bus driver. My question, it's not that the road is crooked or it's really hard to drive on this road. You got to blame the bus driver. Is the bus driver, would you be willing to get in this bus and trust this bus driver? My question to Adman is, have you seen any mobilization of our troops, any effort to try to work with the villagers that are under this type of inhumane stress, focused targeting? Literally, it's the targeting and hunting of human beings we're dealing with from Armenian sovereign territory by a foreign power. What has been, it's a fair question, and I know that Armenian political life is very charged, but it is a fair question. What has been the government's response, other than what we see in the diplomatic, discourse of discombobulated comments that refer to things that don't exist or whatever is happening? That's not my concern. My concern right now are the human beings there in the village. What has been the government response? What are the villagers saying about the government's response on a couple of points? One, to address the obviously, again, it was obvious in 2022, but it is ridiculously obvious at this point that there is a serious security threat. What are they doing to address the security threat that you can see on the ground? And number two, what are they doing to reassure, or are they reassuring the inhabitants, again, the people, actual human beings that live, work, and try to thrive in these villages, that they will not be shot at in the next few days, that they will not be targeted? What is the government doing? It is a fair question. Armenia is a democracy, as far as we understand. We have seen that process develop, and there are questions with respect to that. But more importantly than not, we're allowed to ask that question. I want to ask that question. What do you see on the ground that the government is doing to reassure actual human beings that they're not going to be cannon fodder for these people that are standing on mountains inside of Armenia, targeting them and their families?
Karnikjan, this is a very important question, but I want to come to that question from this point. These days, none of us have heard our government speaking about the security of villagers here. Our government does not speak about the invasions. It is just forgotten. That is why I think now the government is carrying out is pushing a very wrong narrative or a very, very wrong discourse. They have to speak about this. Yes, you are right. They have to speak about the security of these people, of villagers. It is very important. And when we speak about foreign governments, yes, we claim, we criticize them. But first of all, we have also to turn to the Armenian government. What they do, and your question is absolutely legitimate. The problem is that the government should have collected all of this information, starting from the security of people, ending up with the fact that life of these people is completely destroyed, and that this should be on the agenda of the international community based on the government's agenda, which is very important. These days, I was really looking before coming to Nerkin Hand, I really did some research. I have never found any governmental body, starting from the head of the government, anyone who could speak about the security of people, about the rights of people, about the possibilities of people here to live in normal conditions. And that is why I'm saying that I have the impression that these invasions are just forgotten. And there is even impression that the government just does it in a way so that everyone forgets about it. So that to get rid of this headache, so to say, about the claims to remove Azeri soldiers from our territories, so that our people can live in normal conditions. This is what I would say. No, I mean, the answer is no to your question, that unfortunately this is not on the government agenda, which is very bad.
Did you travel through the alternative roads that we traveled on, or the main roads have opened?
This is another very important question. Thank you for Karajan for asking it. Because of invasions, Armenian citizens are deprived of their freedom of movement. There is no possibility to move. There are no roads, and people have to use alternative roads, which create huge problems for them, for emergency purposes. Imagine someone needs right now an emergency here. This will be a problem, and much more problematic, of course, than it used to be even last year, because it's getting more and more problematic. And we could see ourselves. Do you remember when we were traveling to Nerkin Hand?
Yes.
Not far from Chakaten village, there was a military post, right on the hill, controlling the road. And moreover, last year, in 2022 September, when we had the Azerbaijani aggression against Vayozor and in these parts as well, our soldier was killed from that military position, and they're directly watching and controlling the road. So I want also to say that any presence of Azeri armed forces near the communities of Armenia in the vicinity or on the roads is illegal and criminal. This is what we have to talk about. This is very important. And this should be number one task of our government, because having all of these problems, security issues, rights of these people, will only strengthen their positions. Whereas they based all of their claims, I don't know, which are, non-effective, absolutely, only on political, mechanical approaches, which is a gift for Azerbaijani authorities.
Now, and can I follow up on that? Professor Massimino, based on what Arman just said, and my earlier thoughts on this, and Garo echoed this, doesn't the government have an obligation here to own the narrative, to set the discourse, and establish kind of the international agenda? as Arman said, if this is not being discussed, if this is, you know, I hear a lot about, oh, the balance of power, military strength, this and that. There's another track here. I think what Arman's pointing to is that, you know, the government has a job to establish the international agenda vis-a-vis this conflict. It's their obligation to do that. Am I missing something here, or is there some, what's going on with respect to the inability, perhaps inability, whatever we're going to call it, the failure to establish this as an agenda, international agenda for consultation by states? Why is this not out there, or am I just missing something, and this is something completely out of the control of a state and a government?
Garijan, just may I add something to your question, that, and then after that maybe Irene can. I think this is the constitutional obligation of the government, to protect their citizens. And if they don't do that, if they don't show to international people, you know, that my people, you are calling us, you know, to stop some shootings or some violence, as you formulate, but you forget that these people are in my country, inside my country, committing crimes every day against my nation. This is the constitutional obligation of any government. And so if you don't do that, it means that you fail with your constitutional obligations to protect your nation and security of your nation.
And Professor Massimino, how important is it for the government to establish the points that Arman raised as a proper narrative?
Yes, but I have to second Arman in exactly what he had just said. So the fact that the prime minister is chosen, right, that doesn't mean that he has a green card to do everything. So I think the points that both Garo, you, Karnik, and Arman are mentioning, one, besides the narrative, it has to fulfill its internal obligations to the people of Armenia, right? So that's one thing, and this would be to protect the rights of Armenians. All of this, to the inability to protect the people, let's say inability, I'm not getting into the intention, right? Let's say the inability to protect the rights and the inability to set a proper diplomacy in order to establish the narrative of what is actually happening, not a fake narrative, but the narrative of reality, really shakens the legitimacy of the government, right? I wonder, I was reading something regarding borders that the Prime Minister of Armenia was mentioning, Pashinyan. I did not understand, I didn't read the entire discourse. And I'm wondering, this redrawing borders, I don't know to what he refers, it's such a relevant issue to the core of the rights of Armenians regarding security, human rights, existence, the right to existence, actually, because the existence of Armenians is threatened permanently by Azerbaijan. This border redrawing should be subject maybe to a referendum. I don't know internally, I don't know that much of the internal laws of Armenian in order to establish whether it is or is not. But since I see the legitimacy of the government being shaken, at least because its inability, incapacity, or lack of capacity to do what it has to do as per the Constitution of Armenia, there has to be further involvement of people to decide the essential elements of Armenia. I mean, this redrawing of the border, whether it's happening or not, I'm not sure. Maybe you, Arman, knows to what he was referring exactly, because apparently there are 31 towns occupied by Azerbaijan, etc. And I don't know what the he proposes, and the government in general, not only him, but the government in general. I mean, there is responsibility of many people there in their positions to secure this, not just the prime minister, but it's a lot of advisors, public officers, etc., that as per the constitution have the responsibility to protect the territorial integrity of Armenia. Since everybody's talking about territorial integrity, that's an important word that comes at this moment as a core for Armenia, actually. So I'm wondering this now, and I was thinking, as Arman was saying, that nobody's asking what's happening, nobody's asking what these people need. They're completely isolated. It looks like an apartheid town at the moment, etc. So I wonder if a political referendum of essential issues like this, a public referendum, I mean, on essential issues like this can be posed. I think this is very interesting. Whatever happens internally, if Armenia is failing internally, of course it's going to fail internationally, because the policies, like the diplomacy, the policy of diplomacy of a country is established first, but whether it's successful internally. If it's not even successful internally, what is he going to do abroad?
Garnik-jan, may I respond to this question? Okay, there is Irena just touched upon a very important issue related to border determination process, right? Delimitation, demarcation, which is an upcoming process. Look, internationally, there are internationally adopted principles, especially very famous OSCE principles on delimitation and demarcation. According to these principles, the demarcation and delimitation or border determination process must be carried out based not only on topographical maps, as they do usually, but also cadastral maps, forests, water sources, even local traditions should be taken into account. And there is a very important criterion of legitimacy of this process. This is normal life of people, whether normal life of people is ensured or not as a result of this process. What we can see now here, normal life of people is absolutely destroyed. So now, what Armenian government does, what is the result of it, the outcome? If we do not speak about our people, about their rights, that their life is destroyed, then how you are going to use it for the delimitation process? So it means that it will be left out of this process. So it means that the border delimitation process will be carried out without targeting presence of these Azeris here, because everyone forgot about this. It is forgotten absolutely. No one speaks about it. That is why the security issues, human rights issues, absence of water, roads, everything is so important, because you use it later for the determination process of your borders. If you don't use it, if this is not on your government agenda, it means that this is the policy that is desirable so much for Azerbaijan, because when this process approaches, then they will leave this out. No one will discuss it. Everyone will just think, there were some shootings. Okay, then let's regulate these military positions or something. That is why this process also is very important. According to Armenian legal frameworks, yes, there are certain regulations related to constitutional referendum and these kind of things. But first of all, again, I want to reiterate, if you do not use these issues, if you do not say that, my sittings behind me, right behind me, this is the school. You can still see it. Right behind me, this is the school of the village. Right behind that, right behind my back, there is an Azerbaijani. I especially approached this place, came to this place to show that right behind me, there is an Azerbaijani military post. And from here, I can see even the flag. If you do not show to international people, you are the government for your people, that your children, your kids are studying here, facing the snipers of Azerbaijan, and how you are going later to determine all of these things to justify, to bring up all of these violations to international community and to use it in favor of your border determination process?
Well, Arman, the neighbor of Armenia, the one neighbor of Armenia that is at times vocal and interested and lends a friendly hand, oddly enough, is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Because it's interesting to me that IRNA, the Iranian news agency, just yesterday reported that Armenia and Iran have signed agreements of cooperation in 19 different sectors. And against that backdrop, President Raisi, I think is his name, of Iran, said that his country is ready to ensure strategic security of the Caucasus region. He spoke about red lines that Tehran had advocated regarding its opposition to any changes in regional borders, which goes to areas in the Sunni region, obviously. And finally, the rhetoric or the chatter from Iran for quite some time has been at once encouraging peace talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but at the same time reiterating a strong opposition to the schemes advanced by Azerbaijan, by Baku, and backed by Turkey as to that creation of that land corridor that goes through Armenia and reaches Nakhichevan, yet another lost Armenian territory. I believe Iran is a key player, but while being a key player, and I'm recognizing that every sovereign country has its own interests, and as well it should be, and its interests, if they align with our interests, of course we benefit. And when they don't align with our interests, we don't benefit. They congratulate Azerbaijan for liberating Artsakh, but then they talk about they will not tolerate any change in borders. And from what I recall when we were in Sunni, there were European countries now, including the US, I think, that were all gung-ho about setting up consulates in Sunni, because even though officially Yerevan doesn't seem to think Sunni is important or important enough to do something about it on the geopolitical and international stages, if you will, other countries are. But are their interest and their presence going to come at the expense of many, many more areas like Nerkin Hand? Before I forget, Arman, we visited the Gapan airport when we were there, all of us together. Please don't tell me, I know you are, unfortunately, that again, on the other side of the runway at Gapan airport, those Azeri military posts are still there. Are they? Are they?
Yes, of course, Karajan, and they are here and right on the runways, which is a strategic security issue. And using this very important question that you just asked, I want to say that they are controlling, which is also very important always to have on our agenda. They are controlling also very strategically important security objects, such as the airport, such as the water dumps, which is very important. And this should be also on the agenda in all negotiations, platforms, everywhere. So the question is, yes, they are there, of course. Moreover, I have to say that they are strengthening only their military positions. Infrastructure, we have the same. Very recently, we carried out one more fact-finding mission. The results are not published yet, but in the areas closer to Jermuk, in Gegarkunik, and I have to say they're strengthening only their military positions, building new roads, strengthening them, adding military personnel, and there is a very clear impression that these people are not going. They have no intentions to leave these territories.
I remember when we were in Vorodan that we saw them building a gas station at the end of the road, a gas station which was and that road heads to a Armenian hydroelectric plant. I mean, this was again.
Absolutely. Tatev hydroelectric plant and others here as well. They are all of them are almost all of them are under their control. Target, let's say, not control, target.
Yeah, Professor Massimino?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something at to this back and forth comments on Armenia's responsibility, international narrative. So there's one thing I was thinking, two things actually on both Armenia's responsibility towards its people, the constitutional, the fulfillment of its constitutional obligations towards individuals. That's one thing. If Armenia doesn't have a clear agenda of what it wants, as Gara was mentioning, establishing, like countries were thinking about establishing consulates in Syunik, but Armenia didn't seem to be interested. So that, okay, there is an inability evidently of Armenia to establish an agenda. But on the other hand, there is also an international responsibility, and I want to focus that Azerbaijan is a dictatorship. It's interesting because just a couple of weeks ago, when was it? They had elections and Aliyev got reelected miraculously, right? Got reelected again as president. So the international community, by this I'm talking mainly the US and the Europeans who talk about democracy and exporting democracy, etc. When there are international crimes happening like here, has an obligation to act in some way, right? And on the contrary, ties with Azerbaijan seem to be very close, right? So the two types of responsibility. One here is Armenia, of course, and that's undeniable. But on the other hand, is the responsibility of international community to stop international crimes and to stop supporting a dictatorial government that is clearly and out loud a dictatorship. Just wanted to say that sort of conclusion on this issue of responsibility.
Thank you. I know we're coming up on our hour, and I know that Arman has to continue on with the fact-finding mission this morning in Yerevan. With that, I'd like to give Professor Massimino and Arman perhaps last couple of words before we wrap up our Zoom.
Should I go first? Okay, one more time. I want to thank you both for inviting me. It's a pleasure to share here this live streaming with you and Arman as well. I hope you guys do this repetitively. I think it's a good way maybe to inform the public on certain issues of international law and internal law as well. That sometimes seem very complicated. Well, they are very complicated, but maybe to speak it in a ground, like a more sort of, as we say in Spanish, a ground way, like for everybody to understand, and also highlight what is happening directly from the ground and try to establish the real narrative. I don't want to say a narrative because when we say to establish a narrative, since that we're inventing something, and it's not. It's to actually portray the reality of what has been happening to Armenians, the Armenians of Artsakh. We should not forget about the prisoners of war and the political prisoners of the Artsakh government, as Gara said, of the Republic of Artsakh, and the only ones deciding of that republic are the Armenians of Artsakh. Actually, nobody else should have a vote of who they are. That's the principle of self-determination, right? So these issues have to be talked and repeated, and maybe we can help into portraying the reality of what is happening now in Armenia, right? And to Armenians, to unfortunately the refugee Armenians of Artsakh. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Arman, perhaps you can offer a couple of final words here regarding what the next plan is on the ground there, without having to reveal too much from the security situation, and what your expectations are.
Regarding John, we will be carrying out, yes, today this fact-finding mission. Then at the end, a special report will be produced, as we did together with you several months ago. And it will be, of course, based on evidence, objective evidence, showing and, let's say, highlighting very specifically that we have invasions, we continue to have invasions, we continue to have gross violations of our citizens' rights, of the rights of peaceful population. We will, of course, mention in very details what are these violations, And the ultimate purpose, our main purpose, is not to allow that these issues are forgotten, and not to allow that anyone dares in the government of Armenia to leave these issues out of the agenda. It is very important, because this not only will strengthen our positions in all negotiations, in all platforms, I'm more than confident, but this will help us strengthen our positions during the border determination process, which is very important, because it is the purpose of Azerbaijan to separate the signing of so-called peace agreement and border delimitation process. They already said, the president of Azerbaijan very recently gave a press conference and said that these are two processes. But these are not two processes. This is one process for us, because you cannot have peace when Azeri soldiers are still inside your country, when they every day destroy and turn into hell life of your people. This is not peace. Maybe this is peace for the government's political interests, but this is not peace for my nation and for these people who live here and in Armenia. That is why we should not allow Azerbaijan to push their agenda and to dictate their agenda. It is very important. And our purpose, and I would very much appreciate if our compatriots in diaspora, all other people who have at least some influence, who are passionate, who are patriots, who love their country, who love their homeland, that we push all of these issues forward, and we do not allow that anyone dares to forget and to gift all of these narratives to Azerbaijan, so that then later they can use it against us.
Thank you very much, Arman, obviously, for being there on the ground yet again, as you always are, and you are definitely a true patriot of the Armenian people and of the Armenian nation. I thank again Professor Massimino for joining us and offering the perspective and her expertise on so many of these complicated issues, and really making them plain and comprehensible for our viewers that come from many different backgrounds and many different areas of expertise. And I think it really does help the global understanding of a proper kind of comprehensive understanding of where we are and why this moment is so critical. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to Garo for his final 2 words.
Before Garo says final 2 words, let me just very quickly say that people here asked to send greetings to you, Garnikjan, and to you, Garo. They remember you very well, and I was specifically asked to do that. That is why I'm doing that, and I'm conveying their greetings to you. They love you very much. They remember you, and they were so glad when they heard that I will be joining this conversation with you.
Thank you. Please give them our best. We will stand with them always. Sorry. Go ahead, Garo.
And I'll just be sure to say hello to them, starting from the Kurabet all the way down to the teenagers that we met. Brave teenagers, I might add. Professor Massimino, I want to thank you personally for joining us, and I want to share with you the fact that when Karnik contacted me back on September 27, 2020, and said, Garo, a war just broke out. We need to get on and on a live format and inform and urge people to be engaged and remain engaged. I, of course, told Karnik that's a great idea. He should do it. And he said, no, I want you to do it with me. So I've tagged along on this journey, and Arman Tatoyan was our very first guest. And if this is our last episode of Frontlines, I'm glad that it is with Arman Tatoyan and with you, Professor Massimino, because it's no secret we have stayed off the air. Karnik and I have stayed off the air exactly 10 months and 10 days. 10 months and 10 days is what the length of time that has elapsed since our last episode, where we had the wife of a Lebanese Armenian who is being held hostage and prisoner in a Baku prison. We stayed off the air because our objective during each of the 44 days that we were on the air, when we first got on the air during the 44-day Artsakh war, was not just to bring attention, but also to activate everyone to get engaged. And while we've been off the air for 10 months and 10 days, Karnik and I and Arman, we've continued to practice what we preached while we were on the air. What I believe was over 100 episodes when we took a break. We returned this evening with this so-called special episode with really special guests for one reason, to once again, beating a dead horse, urging our audience to urge everybody else to get engaged. Because our audience is a very engaged audience, you know. They write to us, their comments are intelligent and encouraging and eye-opening. But disengagement and insufficient engagement, lack of concern, or concern expressed that's not bolstered with engagement, is what led our people from the 44-day war to the 9-month blockade of Artsakh and starvation of our people, and to a complete dispossession and deportation of 120,000 people who left everything behind, while 10 million Armenians of us and 10 billion people probably around the world, including governments, you know, in Europe, North America, and all the way to the Far Eastern governments, there were no saints in this equation, all expressed, hey, we're deeply concerned, but did not move the needle. Did not want to move the needle beyond expressions of deep concern. So for us Armenians, you know, washing our hand of the conflict, which seems to be the easy way out, whether you live in the diaspora or whether you live in Armenia, but not in the Sunnic region, not close to the village of Nerkin Hand or the village of Vorodan or the village of Churnukh, or anywhere where you could see the Azeri soldier and his flag, washing your hand, you know, of the conflict and taking this path of, hey, you know, they're the powerful, we're the powerless. Washing your hand means siding with the powerful. Washing your hand means siding with the powerful. That is why I'm unable to wash my hand. Because if the powerful is the oppressor, I cannot wash my hands. It doesn't mean being neutral. You know, people staying off the field. This is not a spectator sport. This is real life. And we live in a culture that despises and dismisses sacrifice. The 21st century culture does not understand, does not appreciate, does not value any sacrifice. We live in a world where funerals are more important than the deceased. It's all about the show. And looks are way more important than the soul. That's the world we live in. So while we're all too preoccupied with petty matters or perceived reputations, I hope that we find the inner strength in all of us to shed our preoccupation with what people say about us. I frankly don't give a darn what people say about me. I used to. I no longer do. Here's the thought. What people say about me is none of my business. I am who I am. You are who you are. And each individual is who she, he, her, him, it, however way they want to identify themselves, they are who they are. We should expect, we Armenians should expect nothing from anyone and nothing from any country. And we should all accept everything that's today's reality. Yeah, sure, we should accept it. But we should also get engaged. We should give a damn, because no one gives a damn about us, about any of you, about any of our loved ones, and certainly not about our people. History has proven that. History has proven that from the Armenian genocide, with the famous line 20 years later, who after all remembers the Armenians? Unless it's convenient for them. I think, let me just not ramble on, every Armenian must accept that yes, increasing Armenia's economic power is important. But what's more important is increasing Armenia's security, political resources, and capabilities to achieve the elusive peace that we all talk about. And none of that can be endured in a written contract or a peace treaty. Peace treaties are papers that we can just rip up. They're meaningless. That can only be ensured by military, economic, and a political balance, which neither Europe, nor the West, nor Russia seem to want for us. So we have to want it more for ourselves instead of, being pro-West, pro-East, Russia's bad, US is the greatest, US is bad. Here's the thought. They're all bad. They're all bad. They all have their own interests. Let's see what our interests are, who can serve our interests, and let's see if we can go forward, take a step in a forward direction. For me personally, it's a choice between giving a damn or being damned. I can either give a damn or I'm going to be damned. I believe in that. I choose to give a damn. And I choose to do what I can do so that I am not damned for eternity. I had a conversation with a dear friend of mine, and I said, listen, I don't care how torturous it is. My father was the son of a genocide survivor. My grandfather was a genocide survivor. It could not have been any better or easier for them. The question we all need to ask ourselves today and every day forward, what is my choice? Do I want to give a damn or do I want to be damned? Let's give a damn. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.